In the previous video, I introduced you to the wonderful study of oral literature. We defined what oral literature is, we looked at its main sources, and had a brief overview of the genres of oral literature. In this video, we're going to dive deep into the first genre, which is the oral narratives. Let's now look at the features of oral narratives. Traditional storytellers had a way of beginning their stories. They could say something like, a long time ago, or long ago, or once upon a time. This is called the opening formula. The opening formula serves many purposes. One of the things that it does is to identify who the storyteller is, in a situation where there's a big group that is coming to perform, and now we know who the storyteller is because it is the person who has said a long time ago. So first, the opening formula identifies the storyteller. The opening formula also captures the attention of the audience so that they can concentrate on the story. The opening formula tells us that the story has now begun. It signals the beginning of the story. The opening formula also serves a very important function. Once the storyteller has said, once upon a time, at that moment, the audience moves from the world of reality into that of fantasy. This means that at no point in the story should someone raise their hand and say, hey, storyteller, what you're saying in that story is not real, or what you're saying in that story can't happen in real life, because the storyteller already told you from the beginning, at the beginning, that now I'm transporting you to a different world. So the opening formula serves these purposes, identifies who the storyteller is. The opening formula signals the beginning of the story. The opening formula can capture the attention of the audience, and the opening formula moves the audience from the world of reality into that of fantasy. Traditional storytellers also had a way of ending their stories. They could say something like, and that is the end of my story, or my story ends there, or even from that day onwards. This is called the closing formula, and it serves various purposes. The closing formula signals that the story has come to an end. Now the audience can get relieved from the tension of the story. The closing formula also serves to move the audience from the world of fantasy back to the world of reality. The other feature of oral narratives is tied to the opening formula. We call this timelessness. Timelessness comes from the opening formula because when the opening formula says once upon a time, the time is not defined. We're not told that it happens in 1945. No, we're just told once upon a time. So the story can be situated anywhere else in history, at any time in history, at any point in time. And so the story is not bound by time. Oral narratives are meant to entertain, but also educate. So as you enjoy the story, there's some nuggets of truth and life that you're supposed to pick from them. There's some values that you're supposed to pick from them. We look at how the characters are rewarded or punished, and then we learn something from that. An example, if a child was told not to go into the forest, they venture and then they meet an ogre, they meet a very difficult experience there. We learn that we should always listen to our elders, and this is a very important element of oral narratives, the existence of a moral lesson. The other feature of oral narratives is fantasy. And fantasy, we already said that this is the situation where the things that happen in the oral narratives, some of them are not possible in real life. An example, the existence of ogres and the fantasy that comes when animals are talking, not possible in real life. But we allow this because in the oral narratives, fantasy is a very important element, and the opening formula already drives us to the world of fantasy. It gives it the flavor and gives it so many possibilities that make the stories good. The other feature of oral narratives is that their plot is always simple and linear. Plot is the sequence of events in a story. What follows what. And so in oral narratives, we have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Or if you like, from the classical plot structure, it has the exposition, the conflict, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and then the resolution. This is because most of these oral narratives were told to children, and you don't want to complicate things too much for children, for them to understand. So they were very direct, the simple and linear plot. Also, if you want to make a point and you want people to learn something from a story, you have to do the story in the most simplified way possible. If it is too complicated, the lesson and the gist will be lost. So that is why oral narratives have a simple linear plot. It aids in understanding, it aids even in memorization by the storytellers.